Now.
On 105.9 FM and streaming worldwide on the WMAL app.
O'Connor and Company.
It is 7:06 here on O'Connor and Company this Wednesday, 13th day of November. Great to be back in the saddle. I'm Larry O'Connor. Julie Gunlock, thanks for sort of carrying the torch and keeping things going here while I was gone. And you kept Hans von Spakovsky in order, and that's a tall order because
we had fun. We had fun, but you were missed.
He's
Glad
a maniac, that Hans. I missed being here, but it's great to be back. So much to talk about as the transition continues here at a rapid pace for the new Trump 2.0 presidency. Coming up in 30 minutes, Senator Ron Johnson of Wisconsin. They're supposed to have that vote this morning on Senate leadership, but maybe it'll be delayed. What's it looking like right now? The behind-the-scenes struggles, Senator Johnson will give us a look-see. Also at 8:05, Tom Homan, your brand-new border czar, would like to discuss his plans for restoring order at the border. That's right, I rhymed. But joining us right now is a real favorite here for us, Betsy DeVos. She's the former Secretary of Education in the first Trump administration and has continued the fight for so many things, restoring Title IX protections for women in sports, of course, and many other priorities that she is focused on. And we really appreciate her joining us now. Secretary DeVos, thanks for being here.
Happy to be with you, Larry and Julie. Thank you.
A lot of people are focusing on President Trump's promise during the campaign that should he be elected, which he has been, that he would do away with the Department of Education. And, of course, you know, all the usual customers, Secretary DeVos, are absolutely freaking out that Donald Trump plans to do what he promised to do. And I wonder if you could sort of assuage people's concerns. You know, what would life look like without a Department of Education? I think you're in a unique position to be able to describe that for us.
Sure. Well, I think the president really wants to ensure that the dollars that we invest in education actually go to benefit students. The Department of Education has existed for about 45 years. It was a payoff to the teachers' unions by Jimmy Carter for their endorsing him for president in 1976. And since then, we've spent over $1 trillion, and we have gotten nothing for that $1 trillion. In fact, student achievement has actually widened between the top performers and the bottom performers, which was precisely the purpose of having the department. So doing the same thing, continuing to do the same thing with more and more money and expecting different results is, I think, the definition of insanity. Yeah. So let's wheel it back and let's ensure that the resources get to families and kids and eliminate the bureaucrats, eliminate all of those who are adding all of their agenda-driven items to everything that goes out of there, and really support families and kids. You can do that very practically by block granting it directly to families or in a less ideal but also better situation to the states.
Well, I think there's a lot of folks that are in the school choice movement that are really hopeful that we could actually see more sort of nationwide school choice. I mean, as it is now, we have certain states that are stronger on school choice. You know, Virginia, for instance, frankly is a weak state on school choice. What do you think about the future of the school choice movement in light of this new administration and the commitment to really reduce the power of the department at the very least, or get rid of the Department of Education?
Well, there's a real move afoot, Julie, to establish a federal tax credit, which would give rocket fuel to what's going on in states around education freedom and school choice. And it would also provide a vehicle for those in states that don't yet have state programs to have a vehicle to get funds to state scholarship granting organizations to help the kids and help the families that need it most. So that's another area that President Trump has been campaigning on, that many, many members of Congress have put their names to a bill called ECCA. There's other versions, but the goal being establishing a tax credit that would give a lot of range and flexibility to parents across the country.
The person who succeeded you, Miguel Cardones, as the Secretary of Education, he put out a post on the X platform yesterday, Secretary DeVos, saying that if you eliminate the Department of Education, then children with disabilities will not get any education or funding for their special needs. And the Department of Education is making college more affordable and things like that. Can you respond to that? It seems like an interesting hill to die on there in terms of what you ask somebody, okay, what does the Department of Education do? I would think that the current secretary would have some different explanations because a lot of that funding for special needs programs, states handle that as well. I'm sure they'd love to have more federal dollars to do it, but it's not like it's going to go away if the Department of Ed goes away.
No, the IDEA is a federal law that needs to be administered, and that is a way for helping children with special needs with disabilities. And that law would need to continue under any kind of a future iteration of what education does, but that could easily be handled by another agency if the Department of Education didn't exist. Both the Department of Justice and Health and Human Services have similarly situated programs that could easily administer that law and ensure those funds got more directly to the kids who need it, not get chewed up by a lot of agenda and regulatory processes within the federal education agency. So that's just a red herring. And the focus is got to be on kids and their needs, not on adults and their issues, which is exactly what the federal agency has done for 45 years, is a focus on not on kids but on adults.
And by the way, as a parent with a child who has an IEP, Julie, I'll just throw it to you on this, but it's pretty rich because I remember Secretary Cardonis was basically looking the other way as many of our special needs kids were neglected during the COVID pandemic.
It was unbelievable.
They did not
COVID.
get the services that they legally were required to receive, and so please don't use my child's disability as a fig leaf to cover for your incompetence.
Yep, absolutely. I'm sorry, Julie. You.
No. I want to hear your answer on that, but I do think it is so important for people, sort of post-COVID. So many people have forgotten, or we've just moved on, but it really is important to reflect on what happened during COVID and how those kids were sort of ignored. At
a time when the Department of Education should have been fighting for those students, but instead they fought for the bureaucracy.
Yeah, absolutely. And they had over $190 extra billion appropriated during the COVID years specifically to help kids, and there's almost nothing to show for it. In fact, there is absolutely no effort to even demonstrate that there were any benefits to expending all that additional taxpayer money on behalf of kids. And you're so right that kids with disabilities suffered the most during the COVID years, and the kids who can least afford it were the ones that suffered greatly as well. And the whole thing was just a very upfront evidence of how little to nothing this federal agency and all of the bureaucrats and all of the resources have added or helped kids in their, at their most local and needful place.
We're running up against the clock here, but I just want to say thank you so much for all you've done for women and girls in sports. You have fought so hard to highlight this issue, to communicate the dangers of letting boys and men in women's sports, and I know what effort you've put into this. So thank you. And just quickly, do you feel positive about Title IX and the future of women's sports?
I do, and I think this next administration is going to get clarified very quickly what Title IX is actually for, and that's to give women opportunities, equal opportunities to compete.
Secretary,
thanks for all you've done.
Yes, thank you. And Secretary DeVos, have you had any communications or advising and discussions with the transition team at all? Do you see yourself as potentially being
We'd like you to close the Department of Education.
Yeah, that'd be sweet justice, I think, for you to be able to be the one to turn out the lights.
Look, I want nothing more than a second-term President Trump to be successful in the policies that he has been promoting around education, and that we're part of the first administration goals. And I hope that can happen.
All right, we'll leave it there. Betsy DeVos, thank you so much. Always a great conversation, ma'am.
Thanks, Larry. Thank you, Julie.
It's 7:15, WMAL traffic and weather every 10 minutes. First on the fives with Jamie Whitten in the Hadid Carpet Cleaning Traffic Center. Jamie, we should get this out of the way. Have you had any conversations with the Trump transition team about any cabinet positions?
Yeah, I can't reveal that just yet.
Okay, Secretary of Transportation, Jamie Whitten.
Surprises.
Julie Gunlock, we're following up here on a story that I know you breached there while we were gone with Hans von Spakovsky. This is this scandal now that has emerged thanks to the great reporting out of the Daily Wire that FEMA officials ordered aid workers on the ground to avoid houses that had Trump flags or Trump signs in front of their homes as they were checking in on hurricane relief needs over the last several months. This, of course, validates exactly one of the complaints that people were voicing, as well as Donald Trump actually voiced from the campaign platform, saying that FEMA was ignoring and only helping those that were, aligned with them politically. New York Times fact-checked that, by the way, and said that it was false. Well, it was true, and the woman who was fired for here's why she was fired, by the way, because she put it in writing.
Right.
And left a paper trail. Her name is Marnie Washington, and she has broken her silence about this. And I regret to inform you that this scandal is worse than we first thought, because the FEMA would have you think that it was just Marnie Washington going rogue and letting her political beliefs invade the actual aid work that FEMA is supposed to be doing. But no, she reveals that this was system-wide.
Stating that I was fired. They all alleged that these actions were made on my own recognizances and that it was for my own political advances. However, if you look at the record, there is what we call a community trend. And unfortunately, it just so happened that the political hostility that was encountered by my team, and I was on 2 different teams during this deployment, they just so happened to have the Trump campaign signage. FEMA always preaches avoidance first and then de-escalation. So this is not isolated. This is a colossal event of avoidance, not just in the state of Florida, but you will find avoidance in the Carolinas. Senior leadership will lie to you and tell you that they do not know. But if you ask the DSA crew leads and specialists what they are experiencing in the field, they will tell you. Demand for FEMA to give you those incident reports.
Colossal avoidance was the term used.
Yeah, I have a couple thoughts on this. Yes. First of all, this Marnie Washington is no hero. Let's not turn her into a hero.
She's not a whistleblower.
Yeah,
she's
not a whistleblower. First of all, stop with the whistleblower baloney. She didn't blow any whistles until she was caught. And again, was stupid enough to put this in writing. Secondly, I think what we're going to see here, and I've already seen it, is they're going to blame Trump supporters. They're going to say, "Oh, well, these Trump supporters were hostile, right? They were threatening." Right. So we had to avoid. That is going to be the argument going forward. Yep. And we're not going to let it stand because what they're talking about is that there are some people who said, we're not getting efficient work out of FEMA. You are not helping us. We are complaining. Right. And this is exactly what the left does with parents who complained during COVID. Well right? Said. It's going to be the same playbook.
That's right. The narrative is going to be, well, they were met with hostility and they noticed the hostility was coming from homes that had Trump signs, so they decided to avoid all the Trump signs. Okay,
that's right.
Let me just, because everyone will say, well, what if they were Kamala Harris signs? No. I got a better one for you. We were met with hostility, and the people who met us with hostility were black. So we decided to avoid any family that was black. How would that go over?
Yeah.
How would that go over? I'm sorry, you were met with hostility from people? Well, maybe they just lost their homes.
Yeah,
and it took you 4 days to get there.
Maybe when you close the schools for 18 months and kids are committing suicide, maybe I'm allowed to be angry about this. And the same goes for these people who were not getting the help they needed from FEMA. They're allowed to be angry.
This was institutionalized bigotry.
Yeah.
And they wrote off entire neighborhoods because there were Trump signs out front. They weren't hostile because they were Trump supporters, and they weren't Trump supporters because they were hostile. They may have been hostile because they were dealing with the frustration, anger, and fear of losing their home during a hurricane. And, oh, by the way, they just happened to be Trump supporters as well. But for a government agency to just enact this policy of bigotry because of somebody's yard sign is absolutely unacceptable and, frankly, criminal. And they should be treated as such.
And really quickly, it's not like FEMA has this stellar reputation, okay? They are awful. They have been awful for decades, inefficient, wasting money, not serving the people. FEMA has a reputation here.
And I think
that they're living up to.
It needs to be clearly laid out here. It's not like you're hostile to the idea of FEMA. You actually used to interact with the FEMA agency.
I worked on disaster relief. I worked with FEMA. I worked at the American Red Cross and was deployed actually during Hurricane Katrina.
Right.
I have seen some there are great people, but boy, there are bad people in these agencies.
And yeah, you're right. She is no hero. But that said, she's angry that she's the one who's being scapegoated here. So you're right. Bring them all down. Bring them all down, Marnie.
Let's talk.
It's 7:23.
Now,
On 105.9 FM and streaming worldwide on the WMAL app.
O'Connor and Company.
7:36 now on America's Morning Show, O'Connor and Company, WMAL. This 13th day of November, we've been covering the rapid pace of the Trump transition team announcing multiple potential cabinet secretaries, including Pete Hegseth as defense secretary, getting a lot of attention. We just spoke with Betsy DeVos, the former education secretary, about the prospects of doing away with that department. Coming up at 8:05, we'll speak with your new border czar, Tom Homan. It's a busy morning, Julie Gunlock. Thanks for being here with me.
It's a lot of fun. I'm so glad you're back.
Well, and our next guest, people think, oh, it's all said and done. Everything's over. The election was last week. Well, there's another election that we need to be focusing on. It's happening later this morning. It has to do with the Senate leadership, and there's been a lot of discussion about which way the new majority of Republicans will go. Joining us now is Senator Ron Johnson, one of our faves out of the Badger State of Wisconsin. Senator Johnson, thanks for joining us, sir.
Good morning, guys. Hope you're doing well.
We are doing well. There's a lot to sift through, and we're glad that you're here to sort of clarify what's going on in the Senate. First, let me ask you this. Is that vote going to happen this morning? You could delay this, couldn't you? And can any single senator stand up and say, hey, let's cool off for another week, or does it take a majority? How does that work?
No, it would take a majority of our conference to decide that they don't want to proceed the vote. I mean, personally, I'm outraged by the way this thing was engineered. Prior to our, I'll call it election recess, we had, pretty robust discussions about when we should hold this leadership race. McConnell had already engineered it so he would never have a challenger. Always the week after the election, so nobody could even begin to challenge him. That's what we discussed. Should we delay it till December? On average, prior to the McConnell era, people waited about 30 days. It was not unusual to wait till the next Congress is actually sworn in to elect a majority leader, but the conference pretty well decided that we need a new leader, need to give that person time, assemble a team, and get ready to, really implement Trump's agenda.
Uh-huh.
So we all agreed that we need to have this election before the Thanksgiving break. All of a sudden, right as we're leaving town, they announced leadership of the election is going to be on Wednesday. And, quite honestly, we'd be back Monday, give us Tuesday to have the candidate forums, that kind of stuff. No, we didn't come in till Tuesday night. So it looks like we're going to hold at least the first vote less than 24 hours till we got into town. Now, we had an excellent candidate forum last night. We truly did. One of those moments in the Republican conference where you had a really good discussion, good debate. I would say, first of all, a complete repudiation of McConnell's leadership style, as all three candidates pretty well said they're going to be far more inclusive, not a one-man dictatorship, fully committed to implement President Trump's agenda. So, I mean, no matter what, I think that forum helped forge a better leader, no matter who ends up winning. But, of course, I'm a big supporter of Rick Scott. I mean, the guy is unbelievably accomplished. He has private sector experience, which we sort of need. Plus, he's succeeded in running functioning organizations. That's part of the problem in Washington, D.C., is you have so many people, particularly in Congress, they've never been part of a functioning organization.
Yeah. They've
been part of Congress. I mean, they just function here. So,
right.
Rick knows that, and I think he could bring some real function to the United States Senate.
Senator Johnson, just a couple of real quick process questions. Will the senators-elect be part of this body, or is it just the current sitting sworn-in senators who will be making this decision?
I believe it should be the senators-elect. Okay, now, I haven't had that completely confirmed. Well, that'll be things we might discuss. If that's not the case, I think there'd be a fair amount of objections. I mean,
right.
we need all 53 of the people who will be serving in the next Congress, that they're the ones who should be voting for the leader.
In a second process question, you said you're not happy with how this has been engineered. Who's doing the engineering? Is this still Leader McConnell who's setting this agenda?
It's my assumption. I mean, this is exactly a Mitch McConnell move. I mean, this is why he was never challenged. Finally, Rick Scott challenged him last time. But no, this will be my 8th leadership election. This is the first time we've even had candidate forums like this. Yeah. Normally we get back, bam, you vote to reelect Mitch McConnell, and the one-man dictatorship then continued. So I think, as I said last night, it was pretty obvious that people want a completely different leadership style, one that's far more inclusive, that actually taps the talent that does exist in the conference, and not spring surprises. Let us know. First of all, have the conference together develop the strategy to succeed, as opposed to all of a sudden the strategy just being delivered to us, and we have no time to even modify it.
Senator, this was a landslide victory, won the popular vote as well. Trump did, and many Americans really want him to get things done. But in order to do that, he's got to get his people in place. And he has asked that recess appointments, that he's asked each of these men, the senators up for majority leader, to allow recess appointments. Do you think that will happen? I mean, the figures say it could take 3 years to get people in place if we don't if you all don't allow recess appointments. Is that going to happen?
Yeah, it sure sounded like last night that all 3 candidates are committed to that, if necessary, and it probably will be. We want to go through the process. I mean, we'll after we get sworn in, we will start holding hearings immediately on the nominees before President Trump even is inaugurated, so that the moment of inauguration we can begin voting on those individuals that have already had confirmation hearings. So we'll try and speed this process along quite a bit, but again, it's everybody committed. The president has to have his cabinet in place to do the big things he's promised the American public.
Senator, one quick follow-up on that. You've had some people on the right, sort of a lot of never-Trumpers as well, who have been saying, no, Congress should not cede its authority to the executive, that by doing these recess appointments, that's somehow, weakening the institution of Congress. What do you say to that?
First of all, I think it's absurd that the Senate has to confirm the number of people we've demanded to confirm. I can see a couple hundred, the main cabinet posts, but I mean, any president, Democrat or Republican, should have the capability of installing in government the people that are going to carry out his agenda. This is absurd. There were over 1,000. I would do a deal tomorrow with Democrats, say, let's limit this, let's cut this back, and give every president the ability to staff his administration. And by the way, I don't like being the HR firm for the administration. I mean, as a committee member, nomination after nomination after nomination, it's silly. Hold the president accountable for the people he appoints to these positions.
Well said. Senator Ron Johnson's our guest of Wisconsin. 2 other quick questions on the leadership votes. Number one, was it discussed last night whether this should no longer be a secret ballot, or will it continue to be secret, sir?
Oh, my guess is that's not something that's going to change. Obviously, I'm supportive of the constituents calling in and telling their Republican senator who they would like to see that Republican senator vote for. I'm obviously being very transparent. I'm supporting Rick Scott. Yeah. I think other senators ought to do the same thing. Tell their constituents, this is who I'm voting for.
And may I say, the knock against Rick Scott that I've heard is that, one of the functions of the majority leader that Mitch McConnell did succeed at, I think, was raise a lot of money for people to get reelected. That's how he continued to have support, right? That's my understanding. And when Rick Scott was the leader of the 2022 Senate Election Committee, the money did not get raised as much as they had hoped. And let's face it, 2022 was not the year people were hoping with regard to Senate victories. How do you respond to that?
I think an awful lot of what was said about Rick as NRSC chair, and I give him a lot of credit for getting me reelected, I think it's just a simple lie planted by McConnell. In all honesty, I think Rick did a phenomenal job at NRSC. I think what happened in 2022 is the abortion issue overrode the good work that Rick Scott did. And McConnell used that to, again, McConnell's obviously not a fan of Rick Scott because Rick Scott has challenged him. I mean, McConnell's very vindictive. He pulled Rick Scott and Mike Lee off Commerce, even though they were 2 of the most active members on the Commerce Committee. So again, that vindictiveness, that one-man dictatorship, That leadership style was completely repudiated last night, and I'm looking forward to, no matter who wins this time, it'll be a far more inclusive conference, far more collaborative.
Ron Johnson of Wisconsin, thank you so much, sir. It's a hot topic, and, we appreciate you giving us some insight before this very important and dramatic vote happens later this morning, it appears. Thank you so much, sir.
Have a great day. Take care.
It is 7:46.
The latest headlines.
And your place to talk about it.
News Talk 105.9 WMAL.
Making sense of the news.
Hey, Julie,
Yes,
do you want to buy a used cable network?
we do great.
News network in particular, MSNBC apparently is up for sale. Chairman of Comcast Universal said in their quarterly earnings call, or lack thereof, that they would be putting MSNBC on the block. That's a fascinating turn of events. Apparently, there's not a lot of money in the Joe Scarborough, Joy Reid, Rachel Maddow kind of news. And so it might still keep the branding. I don't know. Who knows? It's up for sale. Conservative podcaster Dave Rubin has said that he's going to put together an offer. Jeremy Boring, who runs Daily Wire, said, do I have to buy MSNBC? Jack Posobiec, who owns Current Affairs, what is he? Oh, Human Events. He says that he's got an offer that he's putting up for it. So we shall see. I mean, listen, they do have some assets there. They've got some studios. They've got access to cable. We'll see if it's worth anything. Also, by the way, CNN, it's been reported by Daily Mail, is about to have a huge round of high-profile layoffs because they're losing money hand over fist as well.
I'm overdosing on good news here, Larry. My goodness.
Yeah, let's see what comes of it. I actually, MSNBC is a lost cause. I think it's hilarious that it's being purchased. But, CNN could still have a place in the news world if they actually
gave Scott Jennings his own show.
If they cared about the news, exactly. I have an idea of how to fix CNN. Give me a call. I'm not going to give it away for free. 7:53.